Hello again, and I hope you enjoyed your lunch. And more importantly, you've had the chance to connect with someone new. I just want a show of hands very quickly, now that you've been fed and some drink has been served. How many of you have met someone new today? Put your hands up. Oh, this is a room that rocks. I love it. All right, another quick question for you then. How many of you are here for the first time? How many of you are here? Wow, look at this turnout. Griselda, are you seeing this? So many new faces. Amazing. All right. I'll continue to the serious stuff now, because I have to do this as well. Many of us have faced pressure at work. I know I certainly did when I worked in a newsroom at the BBC and more at ITV. Tight deadlines? Yeah. Tough meetings? Absolutely. Difficult decisions? More often than not. But have you ever had to make those decisions while flying a helicopter in a war zone, leading a mission with people's lives depending on you? No, me neither. Our next guest has, and she made history doing it. She became the first female helicopter pilot to fly and lead UK Special Forces missions in Iraq and has served on operational tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Here to share what real resilience, clarity, and leadership under pressure looks like, please welcome our keynote speaker, Sarah Furness.
Okay, I'm going to start with a question. What's the difference between incoming emails and incoming artillery fire? Do you know what? Not a lot, as far as the brain is concerned, and I would know, because as you've heard, I was a combat helicopter pilot. I have been to Iraq, Afghanistan, I've been shot at, I've been mortared. There's been lots of times my life has depended on my ability to keep calm and carry on under considerable pressure. Now, hopefully by this point, you're all very impressed by me. I have to say, some of you are hiding it quite well. I'm good to imagine you're secretly impressed. But whether you're impressed or not, you might be thinking, what on earth has that got to do with me? But actually, we're here today to celebrate the amazing achievements of the women and men in the room. You're here today because you're good at what you do. And when you're good at what you do, people expect you to keep being good, don't they? And whilst that's a privilege, it also brings pressure, doesn't it? And whilst everyone's experience of pressure is different, pressure is pressure. The brain doesn't care if it's incoming emails or incoming artillery fire. So actually, we all need to be able to operate and lead under pressure, don't we? And do you know what I figured out in my 21 years in the military? How we measure up under pressure is not a mark of our character. It's not something we're born with. It's something we learn. And it's something I can teach you. So I'm going to share some of the things I learned, not so you can be good at what you do. You're already good at what you do. But I'm going to share some of my favorite tips straight from the front line so you can be the best at what you do. So you can make the most of the amazing people you surround yourself with. And so you can bounce back from the inevitable setbacks stronger and better together. I'm going to share how you can not just survive or even thrive, but excel under fire. And I'm going to start by sharing a little secret that I discovered. Let me take you into my world. So this is filmed from the jump seat of the Puma helicopter. This is the aircraft I flew for most of my career. And we're actually flying down a valley in Morocco here. I'm going to hit play, and I'd like you to all enjoy being a helicopter pilot for a few moments. So as you can see, very close to the ground, we're about 20 meters above the ground here, flying at 140 miles an hour. And you see you have to bank the aircraft quite aggressively to stay within the confines of the valley. This is low flying. This is helicopter bread and butter. And we do this so we can sneak up on people. It gives us a tactical advantage. It is also terrific fun, if I'm honest. What happened next was slightly less fun. There was an almighty bang, and the canopy shattered. And the cockpit got very noisy. What do you think just happened? Bird strike, great guess. It's not what happened, but it is a great guess. Any other ideas? Also a great guess. It's also not what happened. I'll tell you what happened. We just hit high-tension electricity cables that were strung across the valley. Now, you can't see these cables when you're flying at those speeds, but they're carrying about 750 kilovolts of power, and I now imagine these cables were wrapping themselves around my tail rotor, and I was going to spin into the ground and die. And I clearly remember thinking in this moment, this is how I'm going to die. I remember feeling oddly comforted that it would be a quick but satisfyingly dramatic death. And what happened next is the really important bit. So on the left-hand side of the photograph, you can see the captain of the aircraft, and he said these words: "Fly the aircraft, Sarah." And just like that, my attention was back in the cockpit. And that is the clue to the secret. Because where was my attention? Just before he said those words, what was I focusing on? Death. Good. Another question for you. How helpful do we think that is? Not very. Where did my attention need to be in that moment? Flying the aircraft. You got it, because, and here comes the secret, our attention can only be in one place at a time. Our attention can only be in one place at a time. But how often do you feel like your attention is in lots of different places? How many of you think to be good at what you do, you've got to be able to multitask? How many of you secretly think you're good at it? To be honest. Especially us girls, if I was a conspiracy theorist, I might say that multitasking was invented by men to keep us girls from outperforming them. But I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I don't think men think like that. But the point is that multitasking is actually a bit of a myth. Because our attention can only be in one place at a time. When you're multitasking, what you're actually doing is task switching. And you're probably very good at that, but the studies have shown this impacts our performance by up to 40%. Or to put it another way, increases our errors by up to 40%. So let's just say you're preparing a presentation and you responded to an incoming email. You might have some typos in that presentation. And I say that because I saw the perfect example recently. I was at a conference and I was watching the speaker, and I noticed that the same word had been misspelt 2 different ways on the same slide. That's embarrassing, isn't it? Even more embarrassing, though, is that the word was consistency. Honestly, I'm not making that up. That actually did happen, okay? And this is the risk that we run when we're task switching. But also, because the brain is rapidly scanning from one object of focus to another, your brain goes, oh, I'm in a multi-threat environment, so it helpfully turns on our fight or flight response. That's why we feel stressed when we're running around doing lots of things. And I don't know about you, but stress is not something I need more of in my life, right? But also, that stress response, it interferes with that rational part of the brain. The survival part of the brain starts to run the show. And this is where stuff like problem solving happens. So maybe you've had it where, in the heat of the moment, you can't see a solution that's staring right at you. And then 10 minutes later, you think, why couldn't I see that? It's not your fault. Your brain's doing what it's designed to do with that stress response activated. So hopefully you can see, for all of these reasons, multitasking is not helping us as much as we think. And a much more effective strategy is to focus on one thing at a time. And you might notice, it's not new information, is it? We've just kind of forgotten about it in our busy lives. And I realise now that secret was hiding in plain sight, because to begin with, I thought I could multitask. I thought I'd been selected as a pilot because I could multitask. And I thought I was being trained to multitask, because when you go through flying training, they're always throwing lots of injects at you. But remember what the captain said. What did he say? Absolutely. That was our mantra. And I realized they weren't training us to multitask. They were training us to prioritize. The one thing in that moment we needed to focus on, because you can only focus on one thing at a time. And it works. When he said fly the aircraft, my attention was back in that cockpit, and I did not think about death again until I was on the ground and I was smoking every cigarette I could get my hands on. So I know it's very irresponsible, so just so you know, smoking is bad for your health, okay? As is crashing a helicopter. Don't recommend either. But the point is, if you want to do your best work, you're actually better off focusing on one thing at a time. And to do that, you've got to choose one thing, don't you? So try it. From tomorrow until forever, start the day by asking yourself, what is my fly the aircraft priority today? This is the single most important thing that you will do. And I know you're going to have other priorities. I don't expect you to ignore them, but let's not get distracted by them either. Remember, today is about purpose. It's about being a force for good. So your fly the aircraft priority is the thing that is most aligned with your purpose, the thing that's going to have the most impact as a force for good. That's your unitask. That's the thing you throw yourself out and you give your full attention to. That is how you act with power and purpose. But let's go from me to we. Because whilst it's true we're not designed to multitask, there is a way to do lots of things simultaneously. It's called teamwork, isn't it? And I know you care deeply about this. And I want to share with you what I think is a really important but often overlooked part of teamwork. And it's enabling people to do what they are good at to the best of their ability. And if you think about it, if you do your best work when you're unitasking, so does everyone else. So actually, the question you can ask yourself is, how do I enable the people around me to unitask on their high-impact task? And I realize at this point you might be thinking, unitasking sounds a bit solitary. But it's actually a team sport. Think of it as flying in formation. So you're there, shoulder to shoulder, supporting each other. You're all pointing in the same direction towards a shared purpose. But it doesn't work if you try to jump into the other person's cockpit. Everybody's got to be empowered to fly their own aircraft. And we can enable that. For example, who here does their best work in the morning? Yeah, okay. Who's a night owl? Who does their best work at 4:30 on a Friday? Love it. Who works with someone who's the opposite to them? That's fun, isn't it? Maybe you're a morning person. You've identified your high-value task, your deep and flow, and someone who's in a more chatty mood will come up to you and go, have you got a minute? And we all know it's never a minute, is it? But this is a game that we play, isn't it? In fact, we had a name for these people in the military. We called them bubble butts. Because you have this thing called a mission bubble. And what that means is, from the planning, the briefing, the flying, and the debriefing, that's your mission bubble. And everybody knows not to burst the bubble. But every single time, you'd be kitted up like Rambo, about to walk out to the aircraft, and somebody would appear in your periphery, and they go, I know you're in your bubble, but... And they'd ask you a question about the Christmas party in 2026, okay? Now, they're not bad people. When we're stressed, we prioritize everything as urgent and important. So they will genuinely believe what they've got going on is more urgent and more important than what you've got going on. And of course it might be. It might be entirely appropriate to drop what you're doing and focus on their task. Trust your gut on this one. But it's also possible it's not quite as urgent or important. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say it's not as urgent or important to you. And that's okay. I know we want to work together. But let's not confuse collaboration with duplication. If you look at how high-performing teams operate, they have got aligned but different priorities so they can work on complementary work strands simultaneously and multiply the output. And for that to be possible, everybody's got to be empowered to do what they are good at to the best of their ability with a degree of self-sufficiency. And that might sound a little bit hard-nosed, but it's actually a crucial element of teamwork, and it's an opportunity to show people they're better than they thought they were. So let me tell you a story about that. So as you heard, I flew Special Forces missions in Iraq, and you also heard that I was the first female helicopter pilot to fly Special Forces, right? Thank you. You know, it's so lovely, because normally I just stand here for as long as it takes for people to clap, but I don't have to stand here very long with you, because you're so supportive. Thank you. But it's not, that's not me bragging. Well, not just bragging. But actually, it taught me quite a lot about teamwork, and in quite a surprising way. Because to begin with, they said, well, you know, girls can't fly Special Forces, Sarah. And I said, why not? And they went, well, you know, you would compromise the mission. Because if that helicopter goes down somewhere unfriendly, these men are going to want to protect you. They won't be able to help themselves because you're a woman. So I challenged this. I said, would you mind speaking to the charming gentlemen in Hereford and asking them what they would do in this scenario? And they did, to their credit. And this was their response. They said, if the helicopter goes down, you won't see us. We'll be running faster than any of you can run towards the target. And it makes sense. When you think of the missions they were going on, these were the highest strategic importance to national, even global security. And they'd been planning these missions for weeks, months even. And they'd have a window this big to execute their mission. So they're not going to switch their focus to babysitting the pilot. And I don't mind admitting that was a bit of a wake-up call. I don't know if you've met many pilots, have you? You'll know, because we tell you. No, it's true. We do quite think we're special. And sometimes we think it's all about us. We think we're the star of the show. But actually, they didn't care who was flying the helicopter. They just needed me to do my job so they could do theirs. So I flew those missions in the knowledge that if we went down, I was going to have to defend myself. Now, is that an uncomfortable idea? Yeah, of course it is. I'm a pilot. I'm not a soldier. But I also felt proud that these people trusted that I could step up under pressure. And I thought, you know what? Yes, I can, because I knew I was enabling something so much bigger than I could have achieved on my own. I thought, you know what? I don't need to be rescued by these incredibly good-looking, hunky men. But the reason I share this story is because I think it illustrates an important point. We can achieve amazing things, often more than we realize, often more than other people realize. But we can achieve even more amazing things when we work together as a team. And I think the starting point for that is enabling people to do what they are good at to the best of their ability with a degree of self-sufficiency. And what I learned is that self-sufficiency comes with an element of discomfort. But we can choose to lean into that. And we can show the people around us that they can too. So if you bring that back to that unitasking thing I was talking about, in the first instance, try not to be a bubble butt. If you can see your colleague is deep in flow doing an important task, you can ask yourself, do I need to interrupt them right now? Or could it wait 20 minutes? That might be uncomfortable for you, but you're allowing them to unitask with all the benefits that brings. And if someone comes to you and says, have you got a minute? It might be uncomfortable for both of you, but also be entirely fair to say, gosh, you know, right now is not the perfect moment, but could I come back to you later this afternoon, for example? Because what do you think might happen in the intervening time? What might that person do? Absolutely right. Absolutely right. They sort it out themselves. And we know why, don't we? Because people are brilliant. A lot more brilliant than they realize. And a lot of the time, the reason they're asking for your judgment is because they haven't learned to trust their own yet. Now, I'm not saying we should leave people to flounder. Of course, we're going to help each other out. But if you can give yourself permission to not always be immediately available, to not always dive in and rescue people, then not only can you focus on your task and do it better, but you're giving someone the chance to realize they can do something they didn't think they could do. That's an amazing thing for someone to learn about themselves. And they might even come up with a brilliant way of doing it that you wouldn't have thought of. And that's an amazing thing for you to learn about them, right? But let's take this another level, because I really do believe that there is a time for sort of flying in formation, being good at what you're good at. And I think team unitasking is a great way to do that. But of course, there's a time to connect, to get out of your lane, to collaborate, right? Now, there's lots of ways to do that. This is a great example. And I want to share one of my favorite ways to connect and collaborate. And it's sharing our mistakes. Because we will make them, won't we? I mean, we'll make less when we unitask, but ultimately, we live in uncertain times. You're encountering scenarios you haven't encountered before. And if you dare to push yourself and try things you haven't tried before, you might not get it right first time around. You might make some mistakes. Now, I understand that might be uncomfortable for high achievers like you. But if you can lean into that discomfort, if you can share those mistakes, you can leverage them to refine your processes, to reassess your priorities, to multiply the learning, to create connection and collaboration, and build team trust. So it really is possible to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. And I'm going to tell you a story about that in a sec. But before I do, I just want to acknowledge why some of this, all of us actually, find this hard to do. Why do we find it hard to talk about our mistakes? I want to show you something. So watch this. So, what happened there? What are we looking at? Near miss, perfect, absolutely. Do we think they meant to do that? No. So we can all agree that was a mistake, yeah? Okay, this is what happened 2 years later. Different airfield, same mistake. So tell me, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you see a mistake that's been repeated? What are you thinking? Didn't learn. Didn't learn. Absolutely didn't learn. Or did they? How many successful takeoffs and landings do we think happened in the intervening time? Hundreds, thousands. And neither incident was serious because of the recovery actions of the crew and air traffic. And yet, our instinctive response when we see something like that is to say, oh, we didn't learn. And that's because of the way we're wired. Remember, we're wired for survival. So we default to looking for negatives, looking for threats. That's great, keeps us alive. But it also means we tend to read more into negative outcomes. So it's no surprise if you make a mistake, you might kick yourself. You might feel shame. You might want to cover it up. Or if it's someone in your team, you might feel a bit irritated because we think it's a sign that we're not learning. But it's the opposite. How many of you have got children in the audience? Not in the audience. Okay, brilliant. What does a child do when you say, don't touch that? Absolutely. Why do they do that? Yes, absolutely, because it's how we learn, isn't it? We learn from doing. And guess what? Because the brain operates on a if it's not broken, I won't fix it principle, we actually learn best when we get it slightly wrong. Now, it will be a small mistake, I'm sure, but that small mistake is full of data that we can leverage to improve what we do. And that's not an excuse for sloppy work. I know you're going to strive for the highest standards every time. But keep in mind, nobody gets out of bed to crash a helicopter. But I did. More than once, actually. And the same is true for you and the people around you. Mistakes will happen. The smart thing to do is to leverage them. And I think the best way to leverage them is to share them. Because when you share that mistake, first of all, you have to take ownership, and you have to take ownership to learn, don't you? You can't learn if you're in denial about something. But also, when you share that mistake, you multiply the learning. That's how the learning sticks. But maybe best of all, when you share that mistake, you're creating connection and trust. Because you're saying, look, I haven't got this all figured out yet, but we're in this together, and we'll figure this out together. So let me tell you a little story about that. What do you think happens when you try to land a helicopter in the middle of the desert? Absolutely right. It gets very dusty, and you can't see where you're going. So this is how I found myself in Kenya. We're out there practicing dust landings. And you basically find a rock in the middle of the desert, and you practice landing your right boot next to this rock. And you're going round and round and round to the same landing point. And after about the fourth approach, I noticed there were some broken twigs and leaves on the desert floor around the helicopter. And I could smell a very faint whiff of eucalyptus in the air. And I looked back and left of my approach lane, and I could see this eucalyptus tree, and it was looking slightly smaller than the previous time I've flown past it. What do you think's happened? We've trimmed this tree with our blades on the way down. Now, this is a battlefield helicopter, okay? This is a very robust piece of equipment. And I checked, the dashboard, the engine instruments, everything looks fine, nothing's overheating, got airborne, did a handling check, aircraft's flying fine, so we thought, fantastic, the aircraft's fine. So we carried on flying the mission. And when we completed the mission, I got on the sat phone to my boss, and I said, boss, just to let you know, I had a minor argument with a tree. And I heard this sigh on the end of the line. He said, oh no, I've got 120 troops to move tonight, Sarah. I need that aircraft to be serviceable. And I said, it's fine, it's definitely serviceable. I will fly that mission for you. So it was agreed. But about 20 minutes later, another pilot came and had a word. And he said, could you just explain to me on what planet you think that aircraft is airworthy? Does anyone know how a helicopter flies, by the way? We've got quite a few engineers in the room, don't we? How does a helicopter fly? Tell me, because really, I'm not sure. Say again? Like a bee. A bee? I've never heard that explanation before. This is amazing. I really want you to teach my son about aerodynamics. That's the best I've ever heard. That's amazing. Big round of applause. Round of applause. Okay, well, here's what I got taught. Tell me if this is right. The blades are shaped like mini wings, and they spin really fast and create lift. And the reason they create lift is because the air has to go further over the top, so it goes faster. That creates low pressure, and that creates lift. Am I close enough? Perfect. Yes, absolutely. So the shape of the wing is really important. I think we know what's coming, don't we? This is what mine looked like. Definitely not airworthy. So obviously at this point, we cancelled the mission. And my boss had some questions for me. He said, curious to know how you hit the tree, obviously. But what I really want to know is why you thought that aircraft was airworthy. And I stuck to my story. I went, well, it's a battlefield helicopter. The engine instruments were all okay. The aircraft was flying fine. I said, there's no way I could ever have known how bad it was. And I swear to you, this is the moment he stared into my soul. And he went, are you sure you didn't know? And I knew in that moment he was onto me. Because honestly, the second I saw those twigs, I knew it was bad. But I was so embarrassed by what I'd done. And I was a bit scared of what was going to happen to me. So I lied to myself, told myself it was all okay. And in doing so, I endangered the lives of my crew by flying a badly damaged aircraft. How do you admit that you knowingly increased the risk to your team because you were too scared to admit what you'd done? I couldn't do it. But then my boss did something amazing. He basically went first. He said, do you know what? I think I owe you an apology because I put pressure on you to fly tonight, and that must have made it hard for you, so I'm sorry. Now, I don't know about you, I don't think he owed me an apology, but I remember thinking that was a classy thing to do, to take ownership of his small part. And I thought it was brave. And I wanted to be brave. So I shared everything that I've just shared with you. The pilots, operations staff, ground crew, everyone. And I remember afterwards, I said, are there any questions? And a hand was raised at the back of the room. And the person said, not a question, but there's something I'd like to say. I said, okay, here goes. And they said, I did something quite similar myself just last week. And another person raised their hands and said, actually, I've got something I want to share. And bit by bit, people started sharing their mistakes. And I realized in that moment, being really good at what you do is not about getting it perfectly right every time. And I know we want to. It's fine to strive for excellence. But when I think about the people I want to go into battle with, it's not the people that have made no mistakes, because they don't exist. It's the people that take ownership of their mistakes and share them. And the reason I found the courage to start sharing that day is because my boss showed me the way. And not by being superhuman, but actually by being human. And the reason I kept going after that day is because my community supported me. They shared their mistakes too. And we can all do that for each other, can't we? We can share our mistakes. Obviously, I have shared an extreme example here. Don't wait till it gets that bad. But you can get into the habit of reflecting. When things are calm, not when you're managing a crisis. There is a time to fly the aircraft. Remember? That was our mantra. But we had another mantra. Let's talk about this on the ground. So when you're on the ground, in those relative periods of calm, end of the day, end of the week, get into the habit of reflecting and asking yourself, what worked well? What did I do well? That's really important. Don't skip that part. But don't skip the next part either. Ask yourself, what didn't work so well? What could I have done better? And then share that. Because not only will people benefit from the learning, but they'll be inspired by you and they'll share their learning with you. And what you'll find, you won't stop making mistakes. You'll go on to make some new ones. You might even remake some old ones, because that's how we learn. But you'll catch those mistakes sooner and you'll extract more learning every time. And you'll no longer be quite so worried about setbacks. In fact, you'll start to feel more confident, even excited about the path ahead, because you know, no matter what happens, you can bounce back stronger and better together. That's what passion, power, and purpose looks like to me. Final story. So, I was back doing what I loved, low flying through valleys. But I had learnt my lesson from Morocco about wires, so I had the map out and I was paying particular attention for any obstructions. And I was the navigating pilot, so I was sort of talking the flying pilot around the twists and turns, a bit like those rally car drivers. So I was saying, okay, we've got a right through 150 degrees, we've got a village on the right-hand side, we've got a sharp left through 180, 2 bridges to pop over, easy left 30, and then bang. What do you think's happened?
Not another power line.
Just hit wires. Again. I know what you're thinking. Don't get in a helicopter with me, right? But the point is, this time, I did not think about death. This time, I immediately went into the emergency handling drills, did the Mayday call, put the landing gear down, and we landed on that little grassy bank that you can see there. And I remember after we landed, the other pilot was like this. And he went, Sarah, that was amazing. He said, I was still processing what happened. And when I looked round, you'd done everything. He said, how did you do that? And I went, well, I have had some practice at this. But that's the point, isn't it? My brain knew what to do because I'd done it before. I meant what I said at the start. How we measure up under pressure is not a mark of our character. It's not something we're born with. It's something we learn. And I may have learnt these techniques in the cockpit or the battlefield, but they are absolutely transferable to what you do, and they work. So commit to unitasking. Start the day by asking yourself, what is my fly the aircraft priority? And finish the day by asking yourself, what did I learn, and who could I share that with? And most of all, keep going. It will feel uncomfortable to begin with. But I promise you, the more you do it, the easier it gets and the better you get at it. So keep going and keep the faith. Everything you do from this moment on will pay off. like I said, I am not here to tell you how to do your job. You're already brilliant. I just want you to keep in mind that if you have been multitasking to date, you've achieved all of your success at roughly 60% of your true potential. Just think about what you could do with 100. And I've shared my ideas on how. The next bit's up to you. So my final question, how are you going to fly the aircraft? Thank you for listening.